Welcome to the Erasing Shame podcast. I'm honored to be joined with my dear friend that I've gotten to know over the past year, Jeanie Chang, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist in the Raleigh Triangle Park area of North Carolina. She's also a corporate speaker, and she's recently launched this amazing YouTube channel as a company called Noona's Noonchi. And so if you kind of pick up the sounds on that, that's a Korean phrase for auntie's face and being able to read the room. Jeanie, welcome back to the Erasing Shame podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I loved how you introduced me. Yeah, we've really gotten to know each other pretty well, particularly in the pandemic, right? It's nice to have those pandemic friends, and they do matter. And so it's been great. So thank you for having me back.
And we've had a time to meet in person, and then we've been like within a mile of each other just a couple of weeks ago in the Washington, D.C. area. So we've been in person and in proximity.
Yes.
And we also work together on the board of Asian Mental Health Collective. And we're having a conversation today about your launch of Noona's Noonchi, and we're on the pericope of the Christmas season. So we wanted to get some tips about what you've learned from Korean drama and not just how that applies to our self-care and personal life, but also relationships and navigating the family drama that tends to come up for many of us in our families.
Yeah. This is a difficult time. So the holidays are a blessing. I'm going to start off with that. The holidays are a blessing, and it's time that signifies to a lot of us time to take off, right, from work and have that vacation and also spend time with family. But on the same breath, we know that holidays can be difficult for people grieving, going through, difficult times, loss of loved ones that are family members. It's just a painful reminder that they're not there this holiday season. But then also what you just said, the family drama that can come up. If we're talking erasing shame, and particularly in the Asian community, Asian being very diverse, but for the lack of AANHPI, right, is I would just say the correct, politically correct term, but that is a vast community. So family is such a big part of our culture. So it's hard to step away from it. So there's so much angst around this time. They're like, I love my family. I got to go back home or I'm hosting them. But then there's a big but, right? Including for myself. And so I think the big thing is there is no such thing as avoiding family drama. I don't like using the word avoid. I tell people, I don't want you to have family drama. I'm not telling you to have it, but the best way, if you're trying to address the elephant in the room, which exists a lot in our cultural families and our cultural, dinners, we're like, ooh, don't talk about that. Don't talk about mental health. Oh, and then don't talk about that this happened to this uncle. You know what I'm talking about, right? We're just very Asian. It's very shame-based, don't talk about it. I would say talk about it, but I'm not asking you to make it confrontational. Meaning if there's an opportunity where something comes up that you can address something going on in the family, like something drama, and I'm not asking you to look for that opportunity going, okay, when can I talk about this? And then I'm going to bring this up and there's going to be a whole conflict. No. There are pockets of opportunities where when someone says something or someone discusses mental health or somebody else's mental health or some other drama, it could be an opening for you to go, oh yeah, speaking of drama or, speaking of that family, one thing that happened in our family, do you remember XYZ or whatever that is? So I tell folks, that gut feeling, which is what Noonchi is about too, this just like this inner sensation of like, that I should say something. I tell people, then say something, which is very difficult as an Asian because we have that tradition of, be careful what you say, follow the rules, all that stuff. But if I'm talking mental health, which is always my priority, which sometimes trumps my Asian identity, my mental health comes first, right? Then I can be really engrossed in my Asian identity and figure out what I want from being Asian. But the thing is, when you don't make mental health a priority, you're muddled, you're confused, you're distressed. And so I tell folks, when you get that feeling of, oh, mom just brought up something, oh, or dad said something, you know what? I think I'm going to bring it up. Then I'll say, do it, but do it in a way that's not like you're going to literally lash out. I mean, it's going to happen that you may get angry. So we don't try to control our emotions too much, but don't do it as going, yeah, they have made me so mad. I'm going to say all this stuff. I go, no, the last thing I want is to add to your drama, but I will say what's going to help your own well-being is if you confront an issue. Confront does not mean confront as in you're going to spew these words of hate. No, confront means once and for all, let me just say something, or once and for all, let me apologize. Whatever that looks like. Sometimes it's an apology, right? And we know how bad parents can be with apologies, but that doesn't mean you as the adult child or children, however you label yourself as a child or adult child, anybody can step forward first to apologize. And so that's also part of, I would say, alleviating some of that drama. Sometimes it just takes the simple apology as like, oh, yeah, remember Thanksgiving? I said this, sorry. Or just be like, hey, by the way, I'm sorry about that. And then, if your family goes, what are you sorry about? Then tell them, oh, I'm sorry that I said all this mean stuff to you the other day or over Thanksgiving. I was upset. That goes a long way too. And that is addressing family drama. So people tend to think family drama and addressing conflict has to be all glamorous and has to be this like conversation that gets so deep. I tell people it doesn't. It could be as simple as an apology. It can be as simple as, hey, yeah, remember how that thing happened in July and we're not talking about it? Maybe eventually we talk about it. And you just say that and people are like, did Jeanie just bring up some incident that happened a while ago? But it breaks the ice a little bit of that layer of in the room, that dread. And then I think it opens opportunities of like, well, we're not ready to talk about it. We're not going to talk about it. Fine. But at least you brought it up. And that's one step closer to, I would say, alleviating some of that tension that exists. So again, it does not need to look like this glamorous conversation. Glamorous is lack of a better word, but you know what I mean, DJ, right? People think it has to be this big session of a talk. And then they think that after the talk, everything's better. Well, I'm going to say, not really. In fact, you're talking years of maybe things that a family has gone through. So one little conversation is probably one step. However, I can't always guarantee this, but I do feel like you will feel better when you made that one little step. And a lot of times I say to clients, I'm not looking for huge changes in your life. I like they expect they come in and they're like, oh, Jeannie's going to ask me to do all this. I go, no, it doesn't work like that. I'm asking for one small change, like one little tweak. It could be something like you're going to apologize or you're going to cut off a family member. And they may think that's I think that's a small change compared to what's happening. But one small change could look like that. But what I believe is it leads to the bigger change. And the bigger change tends to be your mental health, actually. The bigger change of like, oh my gosh, Jeanie, I feel better. I'm having better boundaries. You're right. I had to just kind of have a timeout from this family member, but I'm doing so much better. And now I'm a better mom, dad, son, daughter, So I'll pause there. But it doesn't, a family drama being addressed does not have to look dramatic, is my bottom line.
Well, very nicely said. And listening to talk was like listening to a podcast at 2.0 speed. You just packed in so much wisdom and example. So I really, really appreciate that. And adding small nuggets or breadcrumbs or planting seeds of thoughtful things that move the relationship inch by inch or centimeter by centimeter for those of us that are on the metric system.
I love that.
Is really how we can begin to shift the dynamics of family drama and family memories, because we have muscle memories that have been built over decades.
Yeah.
And so it takes small conversations over time rather than this, like you were describing, this one dramatic, glorious,
and
Oprah-like with the soundtrack kind of thing that becomes so memorable and transformative.
Right.
It doesn't have to look like that.
It doesn't have to look like that. But at the end of the day, I'm going to say this: practice makes progress. The Asian thing is practice makes perfect, or you know what I mean? We're gonna dispel that. No, practice makes progress, meaning you got to practice conversations with your family to get better at it. And so, like, and I make it clear as a therapist, I work hard too, like as in to be better at speaking to my own parents, right? And I wrote a book about it, so I really struggle too. So it takes practice, and I'm sitting there going, okay, I got to address this. I don't want to, but I got to say something. And again, I'm saying something for me. And so I'm going to also say that people tend to share something for somebody else going, I need to
Mm,
change this person. My mom does this, and they're all the pointing the fingers. I need
mm,
not to happen, because at the end of the day, you cannot change somebody else. Mic
right.
drop. You can't, right? I would love to say, yeah, you could change this person. No, they change on their own, but you can definitely change you
Hmm.
and how you're going to handle something, or how
Hmm.
you're not going to get upset, or how you're going to decide to practice mindfulness, or whatever that looks like. And that helps people to alleviate that anxiety. They're like, you're right. I'm in control of what I can handle. I cannot handle a reaction that I'm going to get. Like I say that when people ask me, hey, Jeanie, give us some tips. I always say these are some, helpful pointers, but at the end of the day, I cannot predict whether or not your mom, dad, or brother or friend is going to react the way you want, but you definitely can control how you react. So I say that to
Hmm.
clients, but I can definitely help you how you're going to react. We can work on that because it's you and I'm
Yes.
talking to you. But when you share a conflict, or when you're going to share some deep insight with somebody, do it for you, which is a reframe of the whole Asian narrative, right? Do it for others,
Yes.
collective. And again, I'm not going against it. I'm just saying, hey, your mental health is a priority. And that's how you help your mental health, by you. We can only
Yes.
change ourselves.
Yes. That's kind of, I want to use a fancy word, dialectic.
Yep. The
There's
dialectic.
you,
Yeah.
and then there's the family, and you have to navigate both to stay
Yeah.
healthy. Yeah. So poignant. So tell us about Noona's Noonchi. You've launched this channel, and now it's a company, and you're getting calls from around the world about K-drama. There's only one that I watched so far because there's so many of them, and that's the
Sure.
extraordinary attorney, Woo Young Woo, and she's just fascinating to watch. And
Mm.
people debate on how accurate it is, but it does portray the dynamics of company. Um, Politics, and
Yeah.
then some unique cases, and how she brings in some unique insights. But tell us about the dramatic parts of it, or not just that particular one, but in terms of K-drama, how has that been useful for you to open up these
Sure.
conversations about mental health?
Yeah, no, I mean, I never would have, I should say never, but I just thought of Noona's Noonchi as being a fun platform. I had a lot of content, put it somewhere, YouTube, then social media. But because you introduced me, I'm also a speaker, as in I educate people on a mass scale, workshops in corporate organizations, nonprofits, or universities. It just came naturally for me to turn Noona's Jinchi into that avenue, because at the end of the day, I started using K dramas as another way of helping folks cope with their mental health. It's more of a tool, right? Never should replace therapy. I make that clear. Therapy is therapy. I'm a therapist. So at the end of the day, if you need therapy, you go seek therapy or professional help or a therapy group or support group. But K dramas can just add a layer of in between those therapy sessions of helping you address something in your life, because you're seeing a story that's not you, but it could be you. So Uyong-woo, that's a great K drama. I'm glad you saw that one. Uyong-woo obviously has autism. Now, me personally, I don't relate with that, and many people don't. However, you may relate to her struggles of trying to fit in. You relate to her struggles of just even, having tough conversations as a lawyer, trying to prove herself. And that, yes, that has to do with some of her, her autism, but also just in general, real life issues. And then she's in a relationship, right? And so that people might go, you're right. The awkwardness of getting to know someone in a relationship. Yes. And again, she has that added layer of being autistic, or actually an autistic savant, right? So a genius on top of that. But you're right. There is some criticism. There's always going to be criticism on anything portrayed, if you think about it, because everybody's unique. So I took it with a layer of salt, like a grain of salt, going, you know what? From what I know, it looks fairly accurate. But yes, I am not autistic. I don't live that day to day. But I think overall, she grasped the meaning of what it would look like, right? And just how the reason why it's extraordinary. And of course, there was a whole thing about the title, is the fact that you can do extraordinary things if you put your mind to it, or if you believe in your own skills and talent. And at the end of the day, that's the message. She definitely didn't let her autism stop her. She even shared it very, like, here's me. I have autism. I love that. I think that's how she opened up literally episode 1 on her first courtroom case. To me, that was addressing the stigma. I know I'm different, but this is me. I'm going to do my best. Blah, blah, blah. Treat me as you would. And it's not like she said, treat me normally. She just said, here's me. And I want the same respect as anyone. So that had a lot of messages. And so that I'm using that as an example of what I say for people's mental health and their identity, wherever you are in life, whether it's an Asian identity, Black identity, Caucasian identity, whatever that is, or your gender identity. There's so much in those K-dramas that you can walk away with, life lessons. And honestly, it helped me break the ice. Some people don't want to talk about mental health, but then they hear I'm a therapist, DJ, and they're like, oh, she's a therapist. You know what I mean? You get that face and then they think, oh, she's going to analyze me. No, I don't, but Noona's Noonchi is about delving deeper into a story that we see, whether it's on Netflix or some other streaming platform, that teaches us about ourselves and our emotions and honestly what grief can look like, what trauma can look like. And I love that we can see that. And the reason why I know it's working is when I get that response from my followers that it changed their life or it triggered them, because sometimes you see something and it triggers you, right? You're like, oh, that reminds me of when this happened to me. That's going to happen, of course. It's just how you process it. And so I think it kind of blew up just naturally. And then, being a corporate speaker, I have started putting it into my work naturally. But now it's really neat that I turned it into a company because I just felt like, having a business background, it made sense. And I started hiring people, and then I was like, oh, if I'm hiring people, it's starting to look like a company, and getting just some sponsors and some brand partnerships, it just made sense to do that. And so I'm proud. I'm proud of that. But I also, at the end of the day, it's not even about business. I am so passionate about it. To the point that I'm sure people are going, oh, okay, there comes Jeanie. She's going to talk about a K-drama. I was like, I don't care. I used to be self-conscious maybe 2 years ago when, as a corporate speaker, I'm thinking, oh, what are they going to, okay, I'm going to bring up a K-drama. They're going to be like, oh, Jeanie's bringing up a K-drama in corporate America. Well, now I don't care. Now I'm like, you know what? A lot of people are watching them. So if it makes sense in this organizational talk, I'm going to bring it in. Obviously, sometimes it doesn't make sense. So I don't. But I would say most of the time it does, because I'll be like, you guys were talking about imposter syndrome. Here's a clip. And then I'll show a clip and it's like something from a K-drama. And I will say, when I get some survey details back, people actually put that in there going, we really like the clips. And that has just validated me to keep doing it. If I got the criticism of like, the clips suck, what's the point? Why is she? Then I might be like, oh, maybe I'm overdoing it. No, it was like, she could have used more clips, or I really like that she did it. And that was really cool to see. And it's not just Asian audiences. So I'm going to make that very clear. In fact, some of the most arduous fans are non-Asian. And it still is surreal to me that these fans are like knowing so much about Korean culture or just K-dramas or learning the language. But if I'm going to be, I'm at the end of the day, I'm human. I'm a human being more than a therapist, everything else. I love the fact that it has put me as an Asian American on the map of a culture that people want to learn more about. And again, non-Asian, and it's still surreal because growing up, it wasn't like that. Growing up, it was like I had to hide it was very shameful, right? I was like, we're eating kimchi. Nobody wants to eat kimchi, right? Or, they make fun of my mom's accent, right? And all of that. And it's shifted so much. So for my own mental health sake, I remind myself when I see people who love it so much or learn so much. And they teach me. Some of my followers who are non-Asian are like, oh, Jeanie, what do you think of this character development? I'm like, oh my gosh, these people are deep. So again, they're learning a lot from it. And that's why I use them, again, as a tool, as a coping mechanism.
Well, and it's also a great story device. And we, as much as we read books and deal with ideas and concepts, at the core of our humanity, we're living out stories. That's
right. Stories are a great way to, I guess, express yourself. And also, honestly, a little bit, the term is externalization, but when you externalize something that is actually your story, like about grief, it makes it a little bit less daunting when you're like, oh, I saw attorney deal with this. You know what? I'm going to relate it back to my life, but it's a turny ooh story. Does that make sense? And it makes it less, in some sense, like, yeah, it's a little bit less about you, even though it is about you. And that does help people process. And so I tell people at the end of the day, the storytelling in K dramas is really dynamic, and that's what keeps people.
Yes. Yeah. And I love the way you've incorporated it into your communication, because communication sticks better when it's embodied in stories and has those connectors. And that's, we're just beginning to learn how our brain works. And it works way more along the lines of stories. I'm learning also along with the neuroscientists, more so than concepts. And
they studied all their lives and they're still learning, right? So I meant to say one more thing that's important too. When people are going through difficult times, which many will all experience, right? When they see something like a K-drama story unfold, and by the way, it can apply to many things, Western movies, all of that, right? But when they're seeing a K-drama and they see something like a traumatic incident that perhaps didn't necessarily happen in their own life, but then they're able to equate it going, you know what? I felt that excruciating grief and pain back in a day, whatever that is. It helps them also process their own trauma that they may have been otherwise suppressing, honestly, but they saw it in a story and it went like this, like it clicked. And I hear that all the time from people. They're like, Jeanie, I didn't know that I was shamed about this thing that happened to me. But all of a sudden I saw somebody do this on a K-drama and it made me think. And those are the stories I hear that I went, I love that. And then they're able to process it. Then they go to therapy and try to work things out. Right. And that's great. So processing is not easy when you're going through a hard time. So
no. And it adds a whole nother point of reference than just a client sitting across from the therapist.
Oh, yeah. It does. And it makes it more fun. Let's be real.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'll mention briefly, there's a podcast I just heard about how Korean culture became global in terms of K-drama and K-pop. And so I'll add a link in the show notes for those that want to learn how South Korea went from a third world country into a first world country, and now the global influencer, which is incredible. So that's a separate podcast that I'll link to in the show notes.
What podcast is that?
Oh, I have to dig it. It's not How You Made This, but it's something I have to look up in my bookmarks.
Yeah, look it up.
I listen to
it's cool. I mean, I'll talk a little bit about that in the sense of Korea also. You're right, was seen as a third world country. Growing up, it was very much not behind, because obviously it was technologically advancing, but growing up when we would visit Korea in the 80s and early 90s, I'd kind of look down on it, right? I think America's cool. And as a Korean American, I'd be like, oh, why do we got to visit Korea and visit family? And everything was just, I was just not proud of it. And obviously shame would be a word, because I was also shamed based on the narrative surrounding me, right? It wasn't just me. It was narratives surrounding me going, oh, it's cool to be American, or, oh, you're Asian. Oh, you're short. Look at your eyes. Things that I was made fun of. But I love that you shared the switch it's become in the last, 15 years, maybe less than that, but just amazing to me that this is where it's at. And it's just on the cutting edge. I mean, there's more to come, right? But I think we're seeing a world that's embracing differences and diversity. That's the hope that I tend to see. I tend to want to look more hopeful. It's been very difficult times in COVID, but then the fact that many people have been drawn to K-dramas, they want to see that diversity. They want to see a difference, and they do relate, which means our world is smaller than people think. I want to say at the end of the day, we have much more in common. And that's what I always try to say. I go, we have much more in common. For instance, we experience similar traumas and emotions and things that you've had, loss and trauma and all this stuff. All of that is relatable. It just looks different in anybody's life. But no, I try to get to that point, because this world can be so divisive. Like, you're here, I'm here. We don't connect. We're different views. And that's not good for your mental health too, when there's that strife. So I'm always like, guys, I think we have a lot in common. At least the K-dramas bring us together. That's what I say. I go, I'm in the States. You're in, I have people in South Africa or the Netherlands, for instance. I'm like, you guys are all the way over there, and we connect this way from a story. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing. Yes. Yeah. Well, so as we wrap up in our time together, I wanted to visit another aspect. So you're like the perfect embodiment of intersectionality. So I know you speak to DEI circles as well. You're a therapist, corporate speaker, now YouTube star on the way to becoming that. You're also a person of faith. So I'm sure as we speak about Christmas, what special meaning does Christmas hold for you as a person of faith? You're a Christian practicing counseling and being a speaker, so you're not quote unquote, you don't hang out your shingle saying you're a Christian therapist per se. Yeah. Although that's a whole nother category, that's a whole nother conversation. But what is Christmas in a few minutes? What does Christmas mean for you and your family? And
I love this question. You're right. I don't hang up my shingle saying this is who I am. But when people ask me, clients ask me, I do self-disclose because they're like, are you religious or do you have a faith? I'm like, yes, I do. This is my religion. I grew up Protestant. I went to this church, and I share all this to not just relate, but they may be completely different religions. It's not about that. It's about when they ask and it makes sense, my faith is a big part of who I am. It's how we raised our kids. And I was raised that way. And of course, there are times where you're like, oh my gosh, it's not like you loved everything about your childhood, but that's the one thing that has stayed constant. Faith is something you cannot see, right? But faith can hold you very powerfully in your space. And I needed my faith more than ever as a therapist. The past 3+ years of grueling mental health work in a country that I was like, what is going on in our country? I don't think I have anything to do but pray. And I'm not even joking. It really was like, I have no answers, but you can pray. So Christmas is such a special time. It has been always about, we start early with the Advent, right? Advent Sundays. It was always, and I will say, as the kids got older, nobody cared about lighting candles anymore. So I stopped doing it as the kids got older, but we always make sure that we reflect on the meaning of Christmas and think, not about New Year's resolutions, but think this past year, but then what we want to change for the new year. So it actually starts around Christmas. It doesn't just happen January 1st. January 1st is that new year. But for our family and the way that I was brought up, it was around Christmas, reflecting on, okay, Jesus's birth. And then after that, how are we going to live, or how are we going to change our lives for the next year, right? And whatever it looks like.
Nice.
So it was kind of like that new reset right after Christmas, and then the December 26th without, okay, we celebrated Christ's birth and we really focus on it. And now what are we going to do? And so, and so that was, and Easter are the two biggest things. Even on Good Friday, I still have difficult times when there's school on Good Friday, or, because I'm like, gosh, Good Friday growing up, we didn't have school because it's the school I went to was a Protestant school, but still some schools, when I see them in session or people are working, I'm like, you're not supposed to be working. It's Good Friday. So in that sense, I had that mentality of some days very, I would say, very reflective and introspective and in some sense sacred. And so that's the way I've grown up, and I've continued doing that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, Jeanie, great being with you this hour, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks so much.
May God pave the way to much success and how you help others in so many different ways.
Thanks for having me.
Friendship. All right. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Erasing Shame podcast. Check out the show notes at erasingshame.com and subscribe to our email for updates. We would love to hear from you, so please add your comments at our website or on social. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any podcast app, and you can also subscribe on YouTube or follow on Facebook. Please add a rating and review so we can reach more people with our message of health, hope, and compassion. This podcast is the digital outreach of Christian Asia Mental Health. Please consider partnering with us by making a tax-deductible donation at erasingshame.com, and together we can resolve the mental health crisis for every person. Thank you.